This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
Ben Settle, compulsively punchable.
He's the kind of guy who you'd probably just punch on the arm really hard if you ever met him.
Worshipped by feminists.
He pokes fun at feminism and women, just joking around, his whole sandwich making thing.
Mildly inspiring.
Yes, I recommend the Ben Settle Show, and anybody who isn't on it, that's their own loss.
Somewhat authentic.
Ben is a very distinct personality. There's no fluff. I can't stand fluff.
Syrupy sweet.
Tells it like it is, and sometimes may not be the most polite manner, shall we say.
Kind of useful.
So I have spent tens of thousands of dollars on coaching and masterminds, and I've learned more from Ben Settle's podcast than from any of that.
Semi-intelligent.
Ben sounds like a crazy guy at times, but he's one of the smartest individuals in marketing I've ever met.
Mostly forgettable.
He's always in the forefront of my mind.
The BenSettle.com podcast begins now.
This is Ben Settle, the BenSettle.com podcast from, can you guess I wonder if the audience can guess the URL that they can find this on, Jonathan.
No, I think they're having trouble.
Well, I don't mean to pull, Linux on anybody, but I would be very angry if somebody couldn't figure that out. So that, by the way, I've decided that will be part of the normal vernacular of the BenSettle.com podcast. When you're dealing with a troll or you're mad at someone and you're yelling at someone, you're pulling a Linux. You've been Linuxed if somebody's emailing you back and swearing at you, profanity and cussing at you for no reason. You Linux out. If you're mad at somebody and you start laying it on someone, that you're Linuxing out. That is the new vernacular. And my goal, Jonathan, is to get this to circulate around the entire internet marketing community. Will it happen? I don't know. We'll see.
I'm sure.
But enough of Linux for now. I'm sure Linux is an okay guy. He's just a little angry. He's got some anger issues. Angry push-ups, angry pull-ups can help with that kind of thing. Maybe feed the geese if you need to, so to speak. But I want to talk about something, someone who's the exact opposite of what I could tell Linux was, at least. And that is one of my favorite direct marketers, who I call the umpire of direct marketing, because first of all, he likes to umpire Little League games. But second of all, he really is he's kind of like the godfather of direct marketing as we know it. And I'm talking about Brian Kurtz. Brian Kurtz was he was the vice president of Boardroom Inc. for 37 years or something like that. Target Market Magazine Marketer of the Year. I mean, there's just nobody in this industry who's been around that doesn't know who he is and doesn't just have the utmost respect for him. He's the nicest guy you'll ever meet. He's, just kind. He's classy. He just, he's like everything I'm not, Jonathan. Let's just put it that way. I mean, I hate to say that, but He's like everything I'm not. And yet he's still really cool to me all the time. And he's had me speak at his Titans Masterclass back in October, which was really fun. And I got to meet some cool people there, and I got to talk on something I really wanted to talk on. I got to speak right after him at the AWAI boot camp, which was the week before that. I spoke they did that on purpose. They told me they did that on purpose. They put old school guy and new school guy back to back. And we have this and Brian and I have a very interesting dynamic. I can't explain it. If you've seen us, in the same room together, you know what I'm talking about. And then when we were up on the stage after we spoke with Carlene Anglo-Cole, I think that's how you say her name. Brilliant copywriter. She was up. The three of us were up there, and Brian and I just have a really cool dynamic. I'll just leave it at that. So he's just one of my favorite people. Well, anyway, one of the things he has, and he's great at analogies too. So one of the things he has is what he calls his copywriting Mount Rushmore. So for people who have been educated by the public school system in America, or you don't live in America and you just don't know, Mount Rushmore is this mountain where they've carved out the four great presidents of American history. And so Mount Rushmore, 4 great presidents. Well, he relates it to his 4 favorite copywriters. I think he has 2 Mount Rushmores. I think one is the old school copywriters like Eugene Schwartz and Mel Martin and some other guys. And then there's the newer school ones, which is Gary Bencivenga, Clayton Makepeace, Jim Rutz. And I can't remember who his 4th one is. I mean, they're all so brilliant at that level. It's kind of hard to even know who's what, where. But my point is he has this Mount Rushmore analogy. These are the people that he looks up to the most in copywriting, and that he's learned the most from, and that he got to actually work with personally. And so he has real stories. And remember, Jonathan, we had him on the first weekend of 2016. We did that, and that was great. I mean, that was almost a 3-hour talk, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And you and I were just geeking out over this stuff. we were complete copywriting guru fanboys, but not GOO, GURU fanboys. And a merry time was had by all. But I was thinking about this a couple months ago, or well, more than a couple months ago. It was probably like 5 or 6 months ago. I was thinking about what's my Mount Rushmore? Who are the 4 most influential people overall on my, now there's so many more than 4, but if I had to narrow it down to 4, who would they be? And I thought about this, and it took me about 7 seconds to write these 4 names down that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about these 4 people on my, now everyone's Mount Rushmore is different. So, you know, the first time I talked about this, someone said, why isn't Dan Kennedy on there? I'm like, well, Dan Kennedy's been a huge influence on me. Yeah, and you're more than welcome to put him on your Mount Rushmore. Everybody has their different Mount Rushmore. Don't try to tell me who goes on my Mount Rushmore. Okay, I will be carving out the faces on my Mount Rushmore. Okay, not somebody else. And I would guess, Jonathan, your Mount Rushmore will be different than mine, and you know yours will be different than someone else's. Everybody has their own Mount Rushmore. All right, so don't write me back saying, "Oh, Ben, there's someone else who should be on your." I know who's on my Mount Rushmore. I know who influenced me the most. Even though this first name, a lot of people are going to say, "Why him?" Well, he was also one of the few guests we had on our old podcast, and that is the esteemed, who I call the founding father of internet marketing as we know it, Ken McCarthy. Now, Ken, unfortunately, does not get the loving he deserves. In my humble and very, very arrogant opinion, but accurate opinion, he does not get nearly the spotlight. Now, part of this is on him. He's not really putting himself out there very much. You know, granted, he's one of these people who does not just teach internet marketing, but he's actually doing his own stuff. He's got a very cool little, he's got these little sites set up that make really good money, and he doesn't really have to do very much. And he's actually, it's a very simple way of doing business. It's a very minimalist way of doing business that most people would think can't work. Yet he builds these giant lists and makes a lot of sales. And I think don't quote me on this, I think he spends half his time in upstate New York and the other half like down in South America. And I don't think he has too many complaints going on. But this was the guy that Dan Kennedy used to have as his web guy. Now, I don't know what happened with all the controversy, but I think when Dan Kennedy's, I'm just going on hearsay, Jonathan. Please don't quote me on this. I will deny that I ever said this if someone tries to quote me on this, even though it's being recorded.
Yeah, right.
But from what I understand, it was after Dan Kennedy sold his part of the business or whatever to someone else. I think that's when the controversy started. I will say this. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be talking about this or not, but I'm going to say it anyway, because, better to ask forgiveness than permission. I mentioned Brian Kurtz earlier. The first time I met Brian in person was at Ryan Lee's Freedom Fest event where him and I both spoke at. This was like September of 2015. And I remember getting in this talk with him about his Titans of Direct Response product, which I think is just an incredible product that everybody should have. And we sold that, Jonathan, on the old podcast. That's how much I believed in it. And I sold it to my list. And I think I had the most sales of everyone except Glazer, Kennedy, Inner Circle. And it's just because they had a list of like 100,000 people. Mine was like 9,000. and I only lost by a few sales. But by conversions, I beat everybody. And we're talking some pretty big names, other big names too. So that's how much I believe in that product. I sent a lot of emails out to sell it. Well, anyway, we were talking about his Titans product. And I remember saying, I'm really glad you got Ken McCarthy in there because it seems like he just doesn't get the love and he deserves. Because it's all these like direct marketing legends. And when I say legends, I mean, these really are like people you could call legends. These aren't like internet guys who just put up a Facebook page last year and suddenly they, people, for whatever, that's the new bright shiny object. These are the true masters of this world, of this direct marketing world. And he goes, yeah, there there were certain internet marketing gurus, big names, he said, who said they would not come if he didn't take Ken off the speaking agenda.
Really?
Yeah. And that speaks volumes to me of Ken and Brian. I mean, for Brian to not give into that kind of nonsense. I mean, who are these internet marketing guys think that you're going to tell a guy who to have speak at his own event?
Right.
And you talk about the egos and what the hell. What? But the fact that Ken is so hated by the internet marketing establishment, it means I have to like what he's doing. I can't like I'm automatically on his side just because the establishment hates him. And I think it's safe to say the internet marketing establishment doesn't like him. Even though he's principle based, he does everything by the books. The guy is a genius at this stuff. He's the one that got me thinking about all this, like just the simplicity, keeping things simple, ugly websites versus like pretty shiny websites. This guy has seen so many different websites. And I remember him telling me, I've never seen ugly lose, and how many people would even think that. As far as impact on me, he had a huge impact on my copywriting because he just wouldn't, he hired me to write the ad for his copywriting course. So you can't have like some crappy ad selling a copywriting course. It has to be good. And I was probably only 4 years into the business at the time, 3 or 4 years in the best, still a little green, you know. I was getting along pretty good, but I mean, I wasn't, you know, I didn't know what I know now. And he just like would not accept the letter. He kept making me rewrite it and hone it down and pare it down and get it, tighten it up. And it taught me that was like and he wasn't like an official copy chief or anything, but that is essentially what he was doing. And he was a little annoyed by it because he didn't want to have to spend time on that stuff. But sorry,
coaching you.
Though. And yeah, but whatever. But it did, like I told him, I told him recently, I said, dude, you had like one of the biggest impacts. And I gave him this long testimonial explaining this, and he couldn't have been more thrilled, you know, and he's just one of the best. I went through his copywriting course at least 15, 16 times. I think it's brilliant. You know, it's not a bright, shiny object course by any means. It's very high priced, perfect for someone who's just starting new, you know, very perfect for them, especially. He went into the inner game of things like how to identify sociopaths, which was really interesting. That was probably my favorite part of the copywriting course, even had nothing to do with copywriting. It helps you identify sociopaths, you know what they're up to and all that, because they abound in our industry. I've read his System Club letters. I don't know how many times, Jonathan. Like I said, 8 years, it was my bathroom reading. So, you know, assuming that I was eating enough fiber and having a good bowel movement regularly, I'm pretty sure that I've read that book at least 30, 40 times. That would be my guess. And I still think it's a great book, and I still read it. I think it's just an endless, it's so good. And, you know, and it's the same copy. So, you know, I'm walking around this thing. Hey, you want to borrow it?
Yeah. Every time you talk about that book, you talk about being on the toilet. I don't know how to take it.
I do. I build a vision. All right. Doesn't that give it more impact than if I just say I read the book?
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't that give it more drama?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's not like I'm trying to disrespect the book or anything or gross anyone out. I'm just saying that's a high honor. Jim Camp's book is my bathroom reading now. So, you know, it's not, if anything, it's a mark of respect. All right. I don't just have anything in my bathroom. That bathroom is sacred, Jonathan. I have a sacred bathroom. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So the next face on my Mount Rushmore, and this isn't just copywriting Mount Rushmore. This is just my Mount Rushmore in the marketing world, is the great, who I consider this guy the king of email, Jonathan, Matt Fury. I tell people I would be pumping gas at a Chevron right now, probably, if it weren't for him. I first heard about him back in like 2004. I was on his list because he was like a big Dan. I think he was running in the same circle as the Dan Kennedy people and all that. And I remember getting on his list for his combat conditioning stuff. And I bought like all of his books. Now he's a freaking great marketer, great copywriter. But his emails were so freaking good. I would sit there and read these, and he would brag about how, this is a first draft. I'm not even going to edit it. This is stream of conscious. I'm writing this email and I'm done for the day. It planted the seed in my mind as I was doing all this client work, which I was slaving over. I'm like, I want to be like that. I want his lifestyle. Like he had the lifestyle I wanted so bad. And then when I went through his original email course, it was even more solidified. And I learned the foundational stuff of what I do is like, that's where I learned it from him. I take no credit for the foundation. I wouldn't even have thought to be entertaining in emails. Okay. If it weren't for him. I wouldn't even have thought to mail daily if it weren't for him. So stuff like that. I mean, that's the source right there. It just does not get to me any higher in the email world than Matt Fury. I mean, I give him all the credit in the world, and I hope that everybody follows him and buys what, because he's starting to come back out and do stuff again.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, nobody does not benefit from him coming back on the scene at all. So we all benefit. So he's my second face on my Mount Rushmore. And by the way, these are in no particular order. I'm not saying like one's better than the other. Third would be the late great Gary Halbert. I mean, there's no way I could not put him on my Mount Rushmore. The actual style of copywriting that I've adapted and all that, and it really came from him. Just slavishly doing exactly what he said in his Gary Halbert letters and the products that he sold that I bought. There's something about that. He had a talent, Jonathan, that I don't see too many other copywriters have this talent, if anybody, where he just knows exactly what to say to make the sale. He may not even have to study the market that hard. It's just like he just had this talent where he knew exactly what to say in his sales letters, where he'd have you buying stuff you didn't even really care about. Like he just knew how to communicate at that level, that high level, that to this day, I don't understand it, but I'm constantly studying it still, and I want to be better at it. And he just had it, you know, and he was just great at it. And his teaching of handwriting ads out changed everything for me. That was I wrote his whole Boron Letters book out by hand. It was the best education I could have got. And it's Boron Letters is something I've read at least 30, 40, 50 times. I still read it once or twice a year. It's absolutely brilliant. I don't know why anybody who doesn't have that book. Now it's his son's put it on Kindle, so it's really easy to get it. I had to pay $97 for it back when I didn't even have the money. I don't even know how I afforded it. And then I think I don't know if it is now, but it was free on the GaryHalbertLetter.com a few years after that. Now it's in Kindle, and I believe that his son's put notes at the end of each chapter so you get more insights, because those letters were written to his son Bond. So if anybody knows the inside scoop, it would be him. So anyway, I highly recommend it. It's called The Boron Letters, and Gary Halbert definitely is on my Mount Rushmore. And then finally, the great Gary Bencivenga, the world's greatest universally considered the world's greatest copywriter. 40 years in the business, saw over $1 billion of testing, pioneered this whole idea of proof element marketing, which completely changed the way my ads are written and got my ads winning all the time. I mean, it's kind of hard not to have a winning ad when you use his proof formula and all that. He has that $5,000 seminar I cannot recommend enough. I've gone through it exactly 28 times, Jonathan, if you count video, audio, and reading the transcript book. Yes, I have this weird, I don't know if it's ego, I don't know if it's OCD or whatever it is, but I count how many times I've gone through it. My contention is when I've gone through it 50 times, I don't have to keep going through it anymore. I don't know if that's the case or not. But he made a limited number of them, I think 2,000 of them total. And so if you want it, I've actually gifted it to people. I gifted it to Dan Meredith, for example, when Dan hired me to do some coaching for him because this, Dan's a humble guy. He's out there doing his coffee with Dan thing, and he's got a flamboyant personality, which is really cool. But believe me, he's the first to admit that when he started out, he didn't know anything. He was humble. He still is a humble guy if you talk to him. Everything. I love Dan Meredith. I really do. And he was one of the few people I ever coached. And he begged me to coach. That dude begged me to coach him. He had to hunt me down for like 2 months. And I finally gave in, and he started paying me like a monthly retainer. And I said, I'm going to get this guy Gary Bencivenga's course, because if anyone's going to go through it, it's going to be him. And I think he'll appreciate it. And he did. And he's just, it was great. So I recommend gift. If you have the cash and you want to gift it to somebody, I can't recommend that enough. But those are the 4 people on my it's not just copywriting, but just marketing Mount Rushmore: Ken McCarthy, Matt Fury, Gary Halbert, Gary Bencivenga. Because of them, I give them like all the credit. I mean, there are others out there. There's the Dan Kennedys and the Sean D'Souza's, and there's other people out there. I don't want to say that there aren't others, but there's only 4 slots in the Mount Rushmore, and their faces adorn my Mount Rushmore and always will. So that's it for this time, Jonathan. Not sure what we'll talk about next week, but I'm sure it'll be something that amuses you and me, if nothing else.
All right, looking forward to it. So that's a wrap for another BenSettle.com podcast. We'll be back in your earbuds next time. Thanks for tuning in.
You've been listening to the BenSettle.com podcast. To get your hands on a free issue of Ben Settle's prestigious $97 per month email player's newsletter, simply go to www.bensettle.com.
This is the podcastfactory.com.